What's up, everybody? My name's Trey. This is Ramsey. Welcome back to Better Days Sports. And we have a good one coming at you today because we'll actually be going over the top 25 college football teams because the rankings just came out yesterday and we have a lot to talk about. And I'm
Indeed.
just going to put on record right now, this is actually one of the better rankings that the NCAA has done because sometimes they be a little all over the place. But Ramsey, my boy, go ahead and start us off at number 25 on the college football rankings.
So at 25, we're looking at Arizona State right here. And to be honest, I really like their offense. I think that they're deserving of this 25 spot, just looking at the rankings altogether. But, they do have a loss on their schedule. But based on what they have coming up, I don't think that there's anything that can be too shaky with them. I think that they're definitely a team you got to watch for. It's one of those trap games in the top 25. And I think that the next team on the list is also the same way because they just had an upset, and that is Virginia. How do you feel about Virginia?
So I kind of feel the same way about Virginia that I feel about Arizona State. So both the teams, they kind of snuck into the top 25. You just needed another team in there to fill up positions. I don't necessarily know if they're deserving of these spots, but somebody has to, pick up the slack, and they both have relatively easy schedules going forward. If you're just looking at it based on wins and loss categories of who they have left on their schedule, obviously there is a lot of football still to be played, but I really think Arizona State, Virginia, you can kind of switch those around, and I wouldn't be mad either way, to be completely honest with you. How are you feeling about Virginia?
I mean, Virginia definitely one of those teams that I think you're about to have that wow factor with them, right? They had their big upset this weekend, so now the crowd and the pundits are like, okay, they're definitely deserving of that spot. Think that they might move up a little bit sooner, but to be honest, I think that based on who they beat, I think that they deserve a little bit more disservice or more justice, I should say, because at 23, BYU, they're ranked above them. And to be honest, I think that Virginia definitely should switch spots with them, but, that may be my biased opinion. What do you think about BYU, though? I know that they're always that tricky team.
Yeah, I know it's right now, being that it really just depends on who you've played up until this point. Because there are definitely some teams who are 3-0, 4-0, even some 5-0 teams that I'm like, why are you at this place in the rankings? Because if you look at just kind of throwing out a team, for instance, like Illinois, for instance, who is 4-1, who's played a little bit better teams, is above like BYU, for instance, at 4-0. So it really depends on the caliber of teams that they're playing and how they actually looked, not necessarily just if they won or lost, in my opinion. So kind of looking at this next one. So after Virginia at 23, we have BYU. BYU is an interesting team to watch because they have a tendency to win very ugly games. But because of that, I feel like in the polls, they're not going to be respected as some of these other teams will. If you're not putting up tons of numbers, you're not putting up tons of yards, it just makes it really hard for me to see them going very far, into the playoffs or even winning a national championship or anything of that nature. But they are 4-0. You love to see it. How are you feeling about BYU?
I think, in my opinion, BYU they deserve the spot in the top 25. I'll give them that, right? But I mean, look who they played. They I would argue say that their biggest win is either against Stanford or who did they play last? Colorado. Compared to those teams that they have played, compared to how Illinois, for example, got beat really bad by Indiana, but look at the caliber of teams that they're playing. They beat USC, who was another top 25 ranked team. So I think that sometimes the ranking and the competitiveness of the opponents definitely matter, but BYU always deserves that spot until they upset somebody to where we say, okay, now you deserve that. But, just based on what they have going on right now, I think I need to see a lot more from them. But circling back to the other team, Illinois, who I just mentioned, went, you know, really good game against USC, and they won it at the end of the game at the field goal. How do you feel about Illinois this year?
Illinois is feels to me not only based on their schedule, but the one loss that they have against Indiana, which is them absolutely getting routed by Indiana, but they have played some relatively good teams. USC was ranked. I think Duke, it won't show in terms of their win loss category, but I do think they have a solid team with some athletes all around the field. So Illinois for me is going to be a team where if they can somehow kind of win out minus the Ohio State game that they have on their roster, I think they might be in a very good spot to kind of contend with IU and try to get into that playoff spot. But it'll kind of just depend on what the rest of their season looks like, to be honest with you. Now, in the number 21 spot, we actually have Notre Dame, which weird spot for Notre Dame, especially with the kind of transition to them playing better teams throughout the year. Notre Dame, in my opinion, has always been a team that's played lower competition during the year to kind of skirt into the playoffs, and then they get routed, it seems like, every single year in the playoffs because they haven't played anybody during the year. I think this is really going to be a test to see what their football team is made of. Obviously, you have the two big losses early on in the year, which they're two top rated teams, which I know definitely is going to sway their ranking in the polls. Because if you're losing two top 10 teams, well, it's going to be hard for me to throw you, outside of the rankings just based on the quality of teams that you're playing. But I'm really interested to see what the rest of the schedule looks like because, in my opinion, they're not really tested at all. Really, the rest of the regular season.
Yeah.
So if they're able to win out, get into the playoffs, hopefully we don't see the same tale be told of Notre Dame just getting absolutely routed when they actually play somebody good. But I am interested to see how they kind of fight for the rest of their season. How are you feeling about
Notre
Notre Dame?
Dame, I think as a whole, they're kind of showing us who we thought they are a little bit to a certain extent. And I mean, you look at it, they were the first 0-2 team in the top 25 in Lord knows how long, which I don't know how you remain a top 25
Right.
team if you're 0-2, but I digress. And, so they do get the benefit of the doubt a lot of the time when it comes to these rankings because of how talented and how strong they are. And I guess they're using the excuse,
Right.
okay, you lost to Miami, okay, you lost to Texas A&M, but we're still going to give you the benefit of the doubt. And now they turned around and they blew out their next two teams, which I think they played Purdue and Arkansas. So I mean, they are starting to do what Notre Dame does every year. They played their big teams to start the year out, which is kudos to them. They see where their measuring stick is, and now they're playing the likes of Purdue and Arkansas and Boise State. I mean, the rest of this schedule that I see for them, except for that USC game, I will be paying attention to that USC game. But outside of that, I don't. If Notre Dame loses another game, it's over. So they have to run the table for the
Yeah.
season, as far as I'm concerned. And I think where they stand in the standings, it's fair, it's acceptable given how they've performed. But number 20, I think Michigan has a lot to say about how they performed. But before I get into it, what are your thoughts on Michigan football as a whole?
So Michigan to me is just still going through the rebuilding process. I guess rebuilding isn't necessarily the right word, but when you lose basically everybody from your offense, from your defense, your special teams, your head coach, multiple coordinators, you're no longer the powerhouse that we were expecting to see from Michigan. So I definitely expected a pullback. I still thought that they would be able to run the ball, dominate both sides of the ball when it comes to just their fronts, which has kind of been up in the air, which is weird because the only team that they've really played, in my opinion, that has any type of say to get into the playoffs is Oklahoma, and that's the one game that they lost. So they easily need to win out the rest of the schedule. They do have some tough games, and not necessarily tough in the fact that the teams are good, but Michigan State always plays Michigan hard. The USC is going to be difficult just depending on where it's at. If it's at USC, the time difference is going to be a little bit weird. And then kind of to end out their schedule, they have Ohio State after they play Maryland. So it's going to be interesting to see what type of team they want to be. Are they still going to be the run dominant, run heavy team that we've kind of gotten used to, or are they going to start really airing it out more and kind of look to transition away from that Harbaugh, ran Michigan team that we've all kind of known to love? But how are you feeling about Michigan?
I mean, Michigan as a whole, I think Michigan is going to go as far as Bryce allows them to go, right? And I get that he is a undisputed true freshman QB, and there's going to be some growing pains, right? But I think the growing pains are worth the risk for Bryce to continue to develop to become this generational quarterback that everybody wants him to become, right? And we've seen flashes for sure. And even though that they even though that they lost that Oklahoma game, I think he showed a lot of poise in that game. He did go to Oklahoma on the road, tense environment. He kind of showed that even though he did not win the game, he did have enough intangibles to keep them competitive, which I think says a lot for a true freshman quarterback, and he deserves the benefit of the doubt for that. But I think over the course of the season, like you said, Wisconsin, USC, it depends. Then they're not done on the West Coast. They play Washington as well, which is playing really, really good. And I think we're going to really see how well Michigan can fine tune themselves because their biggest game of the year is always and forever will be Ohio State at the end of the year. So that will let me know exactly everything that I need to know about Michigan. And unfortunately, we have to wait until the end of the year to see that. But I can't wait, I think, at least for Michigan's sake, I think their spot on the top 25 is acceptable. And I only see them going up as long as they continue to stay the course. Bryce Underwood, progress, regression and all. I think the sky's the limit for him. But let's go ahead and move on to one of my favorite underrated teams, I think, and the first 5-0 team on the top 25. You got Missouri. Missouri at number 19. How you feel about Missouri, Trey? I know that they don't get a lot of love in the rankings because of, good old Mizzou, but how you feeling?
So, I feel like Missouri does this every single year.
They do.
Their schedule doesn't get hard until about game 6 or 7 every single year from Missouri. I always hear, Missouri has enormous wideouts that are going to get drafted in the first round. They have a couple players on defense. They're 4-0. They're sneaky. And then once they really get to play SEC teams, it's like, what happened to Missouri? Did they completely fall off the map? Are you telling me all their amazing athletes just don't transition to playing real SEC teams? So Missouri's done this every single year, and normally they get me. But this is the one year that I'm not falling for it, okay? I normally put decent-sized bets on Missouri to do something extraordinary because they schedule their weakest opponents the first half of their season, and then they just go into an absolute gauntlet. So let's look at their next couple of games. They have Alabama next, Auburn, Vanderbilt, Texas A&M, Mississippi State, Oklahoma, and then Arkansas. So they don't have another game on their schedule that they can really relax on, saying, hey, this is going to be a win just because we're more talented. So you're not fooling me this time, Missouri, but I like to see you 5-0. You've done what you had to do against what I would consider not the greatest of competition, outside of kind of the South Carolina game, but standard Missouri, in my opinion. How are you feeling about them?
I mean, I will say that for the most part, I agree with you 100%. Missouri is definitely that team that always loves to be the quote-unquote unproven underdog for the season. But I will say, I will give them benefit of the doubt. They did play Kansas, who does have a really good quarterback, in my opinion. So I'll give them that. And it was a competitive game. They won 42-31, so that's great. But the game that I'm really most impressed about is they did beat South Carolina, which South Carolina arguably has a Heisman candidate in Lenore Sellers. So you would like to think that if that is the case, then South Carolina should run the table with a team like Missouri, right? But they ended up pulling that game out. And it was a convincing win for the most part. So, I think this might be the part of the conversation where I shift on you a little bit and say, if they can beat Alabama, then it's going to change completely how I feel about Missouri for the rest of the season, right? Because Alabama is on the come up, right? They're feeling good. They had a really good win against Georgia. So if you can knock Alabama off of their already ascending star, okay, you deserve it. Hats off to you.
So here's the one thing I'd say. So it's not just the Alabama game. So if they switched their schedule around, so where they would play Alabama and then they would play Central Arkansas, Kansas, Louisiana. If they would switch around their schedule, I would say probably. But just because you beat Alabama, I mean, you still have to go to Vanderbilt, to Oklahoma, to Arkansas, to Auburn. Like, there's still other big games. And to be honest, I don't see how they pull off an Alabama upset, especially seeing what they did against Georgia this past weekend. So it's going to be interesting to see how they finish out because I can very easily see them drop 4 straight or potentially 5 straight if they have an injury or just things aren't clicking on the
Yeah.
offensive side of the ball. So we'll kind of see how that goes throughout the season. Now, next up, we have at number 18, Florida State, which
I
I
love it.
now
I like them.
have a lot of mixed feelings about. If y'all don't know, which you should, I'm an Alabama fan. So watching us absolutely get cooked by this quarterback was not great. But since then, it just seems like their offense, their quarterback, their play calling in general, it just has not lived up to the hype that I thought we were going to see from them after kind of manhandling Alabama the first game of the season. They still have a great opportunity to get into the playoffs. They don't have a very strong rest of their schedule, so I really think they need to win out, especially beating Miami. Like, if they can win that Miami game, I think they have a very solid resume to get into the playoffs and really make some noise. But it's going to be tough if they lose this Miami game. They're coming off of 2 losses, and then you kind of thinking in your back of your head, well, this season's kind of over with. We lost to, Virginia, we lost to Miami, and like, where else do we go? It's going to be interesting for me to see. But how are you feeling about them?
I'll be honest. I love this Florida State team. Tommy a QB, he's okay. He's a dog. I mean,
He is.
he's definitely bounced back from what we've seen of him in the past, and what he's doing with this Florida State Seminoles team is nothing short of impressive. I mean, to start your season out and beating Bama like that, I'm sorry. I know you're a Bama fan, but hey, we have
No,
to
you're
address
right.
it, right?
You're right.
And it wasn't like it was a narrow victory. They arguably beat the brakes off of Bama to start the season. And it was so convincing to where they started questioning the structure of Bama's football program as a whole. So if that's how you start your season off, okay, I think that you deserve a little bit of respect, because now, okay, you've beaten the team that everybody thinks is a powerhouse. And then the very next game you score 77 points. Okay. And then the next game you scored 66. Okay. All right. So that offense is dangerous, very dangerous. But I think that Miami game is a trap game for them, because Miami is playing really well. Carson Beck has that program running like Cam Ward never left.
Yeah.
But call me crazy. I think Florida State wins that game. I think that Miami needs to get knocked off of their high horse a little bit. And what team better to do that than a in-state rival? I think that it's just way too poetic for college football to ignore. And I think that that's going to be must-see TV. And that's just my opinion. That's the game of the season for Florida State for me. And if they pull it out, hey, I think that they will arguably be a top 10 team. I think you can't deny them a top 10 spot if they pull that win off. But I think, honestly, they should be higher on this list than 18, in my opinion. But I know that Virginia loss definitely had people feeling away. But that game went into double overtime.
It
And
did. Yeah.
we know how college football overtime games go, right? It's at a certain point it becomes 2-point conversions. So it's just a matter of who's going to blink first. It's not like they played bad. Well, the defense definitely got cooked, but it was more so a gunslinging show anyway. I don't know if you got to check out the game, but I think that even Virginia themselves were shocked that they pulled that one off.
Yeah.
No.
I would agree. It's definitely something, because the biggest thing with NCAA football specifically with the ranking is, yes, there is a committee, but it seems like there's so much bias when it comes to these rankings. When do you have your loss? Do you have your loss? The first 2 weeks, we can kind of look outside of that. Is it at the end of the season when you're supposed to be coming into gear? So as long as they bounce back from this Virginia and win against Miami, I don't think they'll have any type of problems, to be honest with you. Now, next up is one of the teams that I think is probably one of the most surprising in football. Georgia Tech, for the last couple of years, have just been absolute dogs. They have won some really close games. They've won some big games. They don't necessarily play the toughest of schedules, but I really think it is on the board for them to potentially go undefeated if they can win out, and then you really have a toss-up with them playing Georgia, especially if Georgia does not have their stuff together from the Alabama game. But how are you feeling with Georgia Tech? It seems like last few years kind of creeping up in the power rankings and just kind of establishing themselves as just a tough, gritty football team.
I really like Georgia Tech as a football team, and I think that their come up definitely has been underrated in terms of just how well they have been playing as a whole. Not only just to open up this season, but last season as well. And I think it really rides on their quarterback Haynes King. I mean, he's one of those true dual threat quarterbacks where he can run for as many yards as he can pass. And I mean, to start out the season in against Colorado, I think he rushed for over 150 yards, and you're the quarterback. And I want to say that he pitched in over 140 yards passing on top of that. So you had a 300-yard total yard performance from your quarterback. And I think that's when your quarterback is an all you can do it kind of player, then you have a chance, right? As long as you can ride with him and grow with him, I think that team can. The sky is the limit for them in the ACC, especially. And they beat Clemson to start their season out as well. And I know that Clemson has not been what we expected them to be so far this year. But at the time, that was a very textbook win for Georgia Tech. I think Clemson was 12 on the list. So if you can beat a top 15 ranked team in week 3, I think that you deserve to at least have the recognition of the top 25, and they definitely have our attention with that 17 nod in their name. So I think that we should definitely be on the lookout for the Yellow Jackets to round out the season. And as far as the rest of their season is concerned, I think if they play well, they can run the table. But their last game of the season is against Georgia.
That's the big one.
And I think that that'll be must-see TV. I know that you had mentioned it earlier, but can we talk about that Georgia and Georgia Tech game really quick? I know that we are, a month and some change in advance, but just based off of what we've seen from both teams so far, if you can make a expert guesstimate or guest opinion, if you will, how do you see that game going? Because it's at Georgia Tech.
I know that's the thing. I think I would have had a much different answer for you if you would have asked me this 2 days ago before the Alabama-Georgia game.
Right.
Georgia still, before the Alabama game, they seemed like they were still world beaters. Like they had an all-class type of defense. They're going to have multiple people dropped in the first round. They absolutely have weapons all over the field. And the SEC kinds to run through Georgia at this point in time. With Saban kind of leaving, SEC is kind of up for grabs, and it seems like Georgia kind of took those reins and it says, hey, the SEC is now ours and you have to run through us. Well, the problem is Alabama did just run through them. So it's going to be interesting to see how they rebound, because I think the backlash of having a major SEC school be bad is just something that we're not ready for yet in college football. So Alabama, LSU, Tennessee, Georgia, if one of those are not in just like not making the playoffs, but even just being a 500 team, I think is going to lead to a much different conversation where we're like, okay, is the SEC really the class of football, or has this NIL, has this transfer portal, has this really allowed kids with a ton of talent to go to different schools and make them contenders almost immediately? So it's a conversation for a different day, but I am excited for us to actually have that one. Who we got? We at number 16? Is that right?
Yes, sir. We are looking at Vanderbilt, an SEC team, since we were on the subject. And I think they're probably the most surprising team so far, at least to date, that we have gone through in these top 25. I think at 16. I mean, they're 5-0.
They are. And they have good wins in the fact that they are dominating teams. So when you they put up 70 points against Georgia State. Like,
yes, they did.
Look, you beat South Carolina, you routed them, you're putting up numbers all over. I'm excited to see them against Alabama in their next game, as this will be a true test for both clubs. They're both coming off really good wins, and this starts Vanderbilt's SEC gauntlet, the second half of their schedule. Alabama, LSU, Missouri, Texas, Auburn, Kentucky, Tennessee. They're basically playing ranked teams for the rest of their schedule. So if they do suffer a loss, hopefully that loss does not turn into a 2, that turns into 3, that turns into a poorly ended season. But how are you feeling about our number 15 spot? So we have Tennessee up next.
I mean, Tennessee, another SEC team. I think that right now we're at that point in the top 25 where we're just going to start talking about SEC and Big Ten for the most part. So,
Basically, yeah.
I mean, as long as we're okay with that, right? I think
Right.
Tennessee is another SEC team. You know, they're 4-1. They, I think, are always a very explosive team because it's very hard to win at Rocky Top. You know, that stadium, that environment is nothing short of electric, and they are beating teams that other top 25 teams can't. They beat Syracuse. Clemson couldn't beat Syracuse. No disrespect, but I mean, you know, we just have to call a spade, right? You know, and they lost to Georgia, but again, that was an overtime game. I think that that could have went anyone's way. So I think if they were to meet again in the SEC championship, it might be a little different. But you know, we don't know how Georgia is going to look at the end of the season. To be honest with you, after what happened with Alabama, we don't know how Tennessee is going to look at the end of the season because even though they did lose against Georgia, they still have to go play Arkansas. And after Arkansas, they have to play Bama and Kentucky back to back, and those are both road games. So it's not like I'm saying that they are not a strong and relevant team in the SEC. I'm saying that they are about to go through the toughest stretch of their season because even after they finish their road trip after going to Bama and going to Kentucky, they get to come home. And who did they get as their president? Oklahoma. So I think that we will find out a lot about what Tennessee is made up of over these next 3 to 4 weeks, especially. But, you know, what do you think about the Vols, man? How do you feel about their trajectory over the next couple of weeks?
If like one thing to kind of encapsulate Tennessee, in my opinion, is just like offensively explosive. Like
Yes.
they are going to put up points. The question is, will their defense be able to hold you to under 30? I don't know. It's just their depth, or maybe, you know, lack of, I don't know, time together when it comes to their second half corners and safeties, because their defense has, on multiple occasions, even in blowout wins, gotten diced up by quarterbacks who I'm like, they shouldn't be working your defense like this. If this was any other team in the SEC or a good caliber team, like sure, you put up 40, but your defense could have given up 60 pretty easily. So I'm going to be interested to see how their defense kind of comes together playing better competition. Like, yeah, they played Georgia. That is their one loss. But outside of Georgia, they haven't played another ranked opponent. So once they actually start playing good teams who are going to air out the ball, it's going to be interesting to see if that defense can kind of stay relevant, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Next up at the number 14 spot, we have Iowa State, who is slowly building up some momentum, and it seems like they have a target on their back because they don't play another real like contender, in my opinion, for the rest of their schedule. So this for me is an easy bet. They should win out the rest of their schedule, go into the playoffs undefeated. This is just how I am seeing it, unless they go into their championship, their conference championship game. But looking at their schedule, I am more than excited for them to kind of close this out and have a lot of momentum going into the playoffs and their conference championship.
Yeah, I think Iowa, has probably the most underrated defense in the top 15 so far. And I mean, if you look at their games, no one has scored more than 21 points on them. You know, I think that that's a testament to their defense, and their defense is strong enough to make sure that their offense can handle the reins. And it's not a disrespect to their offense, right? Their offense put up 55 points against South Dakota. I know it's South Dakota, but still, 55 points is 55 points, if you ask me. But I will say that Iowa is probably my team. I would say that they would go undefeated, but it's college football, right? We can't just sit here and say that, Iowa State is going to go undefeated, right? I think that their trap game is going to be that TCU game on November 8th when they have to go down to TCU. I think that they will pull it out against Arizona State. I think Arizona State is going to still grow as a team, but by the time that they meet up, I think that they will be able to hold off that offense for Arizona State and move on to the next week and then drop one against TCU. And I think that's when we're going to really see where Iowa falls in terms of CFP placing if they do, end up making it that far. But Iowa State's defense definitely deserves to nod here. Their defense is certified, no doubt, no doubt. I mean, yeah, I'm a defensive guy, so anytime you can valid, you know, validate your strength in the trenches as well as the secondary, and you know that you have to have that continuity as a team, it defense wins championships. It's a reason that they say that, you know. So, but moving on to the next spot on the list, where are we at? Number 13, Magic number 13. Number 13, let's see, we have LSU. Yeah, who just dropped one. Yeah, I know. And I'm gonna give them a moment of silence because I know that was a really tough game for them to drop. Even though that they were the underdogs in that game, even though that they were a top five team, which is insane. And the fact that they still lost the game says a lot. But how do you feel about LSU dropping that one against Ole Miss and just LSU as a whole?
Look, LSU, Kelly has a lot of checks that he tried to cash that were obviously fraudulent. He came into LSU, he was talking about, oh, now that I'm in the SEC, I got all this talent, I'm ready to win championships. Like, oh, first year we're going to be in the playoffs, we'll be looking good. And start of the season, all you hear is how good LSU is, how they have all these amazing players everywhere. They have NFL bodies everywhere. They have, some people say, arguably one of the best college football coaches in recent memory. And for some reason, they just cannot put it together when it comes to, beating good teams. Now, I know they beat Clemson. I think Clemson we dramatically overrated at the beginning of the season, as we can kind of see their record and just kind of their play. This LSU team is finally getting to play big games. South Carolina is their next one. They're going to go to Vanderbilt, Texas A&M. This is the time where I need to see LSU do something extremely well, whether it be I need their offense to be like, oh, Kelly has a great understanding of his offense, his play calling. He has his players exactly where they need to be. Or I need to see like their defense absolutely shut out. Right now, they just seem like a good team who cannot beat great teams. That's just how I felt about LSU.
Yeah, I kind of feel the same. I will say that they did, at the time, that was a ranked matchup when they went up against Florida and they embarrassed DJ Lagway. I think he threw 5 interceptions that game, if I remember correctly, which, goodness gracious. And I had really high hopes on Florida coming into the year as well. And I would hope that we would have gotten to talk to them over the course of this segment. But unfortunately, they are not in the top 5, and I do not see them coming back anytime soon. But to stay back on the task of LSU, okay, they dropped one game. They dropped one game to Ole Miss. It wasn't like they got blown out. It was a competitive game. There was a little bit of fanfare there. One of the linebackers is dating Lane Kiflin's daughter, and then he says, "I need to make sure to see if we covered the under," which is really funny. I enjoy storyline games like that,
Right.
and it's fun. It's joyous. It was a interconference battle, so it's good for the sport. But looking up to the rest of their season, they play South Carolina, which is never fun for anybody. Then they have at Vanderbilt, at Texas A&M, or at home against Texas A&M, and then they have to go to Bama. I think that we're about to see if LSU is the top 5 team that they claim that they are, because if they can run the table with Vandy, Texas, and Bama, I think that, hey, need we say more? You might as well punch their ticket to the CFP now. But they're going to have to earn it. They're going to have to earn it. And I think for them, in order to do that, Nussmeier has to continue to look like a top 2 quarterback prospect in the league. I think that he has to continuously abuse his talents and those LSU receivers to his advantage if they're going to continue to be as relevant as they claim that they are. But, what about the next team that we have on the list here, which we have mentioned I don't know how many times over the course of this already, but Georgia's sitting at number 12 right now after dropping one to Bama, and I'll go ahead and give the reins to you since you did defeat them. Crimson Tide, Roll Tide, Roll. So go ahead. I'll let you have your coup de grace here.
Look, Georgia is still a national champion level team. I didn't expect any of these teams to win out. Like, obviously, college, it's hard to win every single game, go undefeated. We've only seen it a handful of times. But
Yeah.
your losses during the season, like losing to Alabama, is something that can very easily get overlooked, in my opinion, if you can win out the rest of your season. Say, okay, you had this one bad loss, but if we look up at the end of the year and Alabama's ranked number 2, I feel like the committee is going to say, yeah, you lost to the second best team in the NCAA. Like, what really can we do? We can't penalize you that much for playing good teams and losing close. You didn't get blown out. You didn't get 60 hung up on you. So it's going to be interesting to see them finish out the rest of their schedule. Let's see how they play against Ole Miss. Like, is this just kind of a we really wish we could have had one or two plays back from that Alabama game, and it would have switched us from
Yeah.
being undefeated from having one loss. So how they finish out and how they play the remainder of their season is going to tell a lot. They have some good games coming up, and the cool thing about the SEC is even though some of the teams in the SEC aren't necessarily scheduled like standings wise very good. When they go play Kentucky, they go play Auburn. Those are two very solid football teams that you can still learn a lot in wins or losses when it comes to playing those teams. So I think Georgia's going to be fine. I think they're going to have 2 weeks really to gather themselves to go into the Ole Miss game and then going into the Texas game. So they still have a couple big games on their schedules. But in my opinion, I don't think this is a Georgia team that can win or that can lose 2 more games this season and still feel really good about their chances when it comes to like competing for an SEC championship or anything like that.
I agree. Honestly, I don't think that they can lose another game. I think that if Georgia's going to be as competitive as they need to be and advance in that college football playoff, they need a bye. So they need one of those top seeds. And if they want one of those top seeds, they have to run the table, in my opinion. And that's them beating the rest of their SEC counterparts. And let's not act like their schedule is easy. I mean, they have to
No.
play at Auburn, like you said. They have to play Ole Miss. They have to play Florida, which is a trap game, if you ask me. It's still a SEC team. They're going to feel like they have something to prove. And if Georgia comes to their house, it's going to be a perfect time to play spoilers. So they're going to have to be on their P's and Q's for the rest of the season. And they have to play Texas, too. Arch Manning is looking better. It's looking a lot better compared to week 1. So I think, and as we also said, they finished the season against Georgia Tech, and Haynes King is going to be waiting for them down there too. So I think if Georgia runs the table, then okay, you've earned my respect. But I think them dropping that Bama game, I get it. Like you said, it's hard to win in college football. It's hard to consistently win in any sport, right?
Right.
But that was a SEC rival. You did drop the game at home. So now we have to see if we can run the table for the rest of the season if we're going to be the crown of the SEC like everybody needs to have at the end of the season. It's always that one SEC team where you're like, there's not one team that can beat our team. And if it's going to be Georgia, they have to run the table.
Fuck.
And that's just how I feel about it. But moving on the list here, finally getting close to the top 10, just outside of the top 10, we have Texas Tech, the Red Raiders. How do you feel about Texas Tech, man?
I think out of all the teams that are currently like even in the top 25, like even if you look at Arizona State or Virginia kind of sneaking their way into the top 25, I would
Yeah.
argue that Texas Tech is probably more under the radar than anybody else when it comes to the rankings. They just their schedule is soft. They don't play really any competition, and because of that and how they look this season, which is we're gonna put up a ton of points. Our defense is going to be solid and not give up a ton of explosive plays, especially to offenses that aren't necessarily the greatest in college football. I think they have a very good chance to be competitive in the playoffs and for conference championships. But I also feel like this could very easily be one of them Cinderella teams where Texas Tech fans are going to be, yelling from their roofs, talking about we're undefeated, look how amazing we are, we're going into the playoffs, and then they absolutely get routed by a team that's of good competition. But how are you feeling about Texas Tech?
I think Texas Tech is that team that we have every year that will go undefeated when it's all said and done. Like you said, they're in the Big 12. Their schedule is soft. They have their trademark win already against Utah in early on in the season. So I think when you look at the rest of their schedule, there's not really much of a challenge. I mean, they do have to go to Arizona State, but based on how they've been playing well, I think while that will be a good game, I don't think that that will be a game that will make them sweat too much just based on what I've seen so far, unless Arizona State just has one of those, amazing offensive displays of brilliance, right? Which definitely possible. They have a very good quarterback, and I think outside of that game, if they can just stay level and stay focused, they'll be the Cincinnati team that went undefeated that one year, right? They'll be that team that is getting all of the clamor because of their undefeated record. And then when they start to play real competition against a Big Ten team in the CFP or an SEC team, then we will start to see really where that gap widens a little bit. And that's not to be disrespectful to Texas Tech as a football team, because they're a very talented, very skilled, very professional football team. I mean, they're number 11 for a reason.
Right.
I just think that when it comes to playing some of that tough nose SEC Big Ten football, I think it might just be a little bit too much for them to overcome. Like, imagine if their first round in the CFP playoff is against an SEC team like Bama, and that's their first draw. That might be a tough game, or even Tennessee, right? Ole Miss, LSU, Georgia. Do we realistically see Texas Tech beating any one of those teams when it's all said and done?
See,
So
the thing that I always kind of have to step back from and take a look at, it's like, okay, let's say you go undefeated, you have a top bid, but if other schools are like, man, we really want to play you and you're a top seeded team, it just doesn't make me feel good about your outcome when it comes to winning the ship or anything like that. Yeah, we got number 10. We in the top 10s, ladies and gentlemen. And we got Alabama roll tide, baby. Roll tide. Okay? Because I got some things to say here. I got some good stuff. So,
get it off your chest.
I have, for the last few seasons, I have been a huge critic when it came to DeBoer's hiring from Washington. I did not feel that he was necessarily a great coach. I felt that he had arguably a Heisman caliber player in Penix who really brought that team to the playoffs. Sure, play calling was good. He definitely coached that team to the best of his ability, but I did not feel like the reason they were in the position that they were in the national championship game was because of their head coach. It was because of their quarterback. And just because you pick him up and take him to a different team, I didn't see how that success was going to continue. I didn't see DeBoer as like a quarterback whisperer or this super brainiac when it came to his offensive play calling or anything of that nature. He's a good, solid coach. Don't get me wrong. Alabama has talent everywhere. They're still Alabama. They're still going to put people in the pros. But this year has felt weird to me. First of all, losing to Florida State actually didn't necessarily surprise me. Alabama has always struggled with quarterbacks who are mobile, who can throw the ball down the field. If you can scurry around, buy time, Alabama has always struggled with those type of quarterbacks, going all the way back and really starting it off when Johnny Manziel was like, I'm the Heisman quarterback, pay me my money, I'm over here hungover, and I'm going to give Alabama a 40 ball. So this team has already had growing pains when it came to last season, in my opinion. We lost some really close games. I feel like our play calling was really bad from DeBoer. This year, after the first one, I think it was kind of a wake-up call when it said, yeah, DeBoer, you're a good coach, but the standard here is different than it is at Washington. I know that you could drop a few games and, great, still a good team. You're still a good coach. The minute you lost your first game, people were calling for your job. They're like, this is a different environment coming behind Saban, arguably the best coach of all time when it comes to college football. I'm excited to see where we are now, being that we just beat Georgia. But if you would have asked me 3 days ago how I felt about us, it would have been monumentally worse than what I feel about us right now.
Yeah. Yeah, and Bama, I feel, is the team that gets the most attention, right? And DeBoer has definitely been under fire since the start of the season. Like I said, he got that bad loss against Florida State to open up the year. I know that people were calling for his job for week one after that game, right?
Yes.
And it is it. I think he understood. I think he found out really quick that the Tuscaloosa faithful reminded him to look and listen. This is Bama football. You're not about to do what you thought that you could get away with up in Washington. This is SEC football. We are the crown jewel, and you have to fall in line and start getting these wins under suit. And he delivered with a trademark Georgia win. I mean, hey, I'll give it to him. And they looked good. They looked good. They went to Georgia, and it was a tight game, but it wasn't. It was a convincing game. That's what I'll say. And go ahead. No, go ahead.
I would say that Alabama, regardless of how we are, like throughout the season, Alabama has always been a team that plays really well in its biggest games. So if we drop a few games, we have Georgia coming up. Georgia's ranked number one. We play them till double overtime, and then we'll see them in the SEC championship. So especially under DeBoer, I can't get a read on like his play calling, on his clock management. Like sometimes it's weird, and he'll do things where I'm like, okay, you need to use a timeout, and then he doesn't use any of them. And like you wasted opportunities that you could have put points on the board. So it's like I said, it's just not. He's not a hire that I'm necessarily a huge fan of, but I'm just happy to see where we are and see us get back to kind of the winning and see kind of that pressure get taken off of our shoulders when it comes to winning a big game, because that's really what he needed. He needed a big win under his belt, and he can kind of ride that for the rest of the year, kind of until he goes to Oklahoma. There are some good games left on the schedule, a lot of ranked teams on the schedule, so we'll definitely know what Alabama is made of through the next few weeks, to be honest with you. Now, next up, number 9, we have Texas, and arguably, some would say, one of the most hype quarterbacks we've ever seen kind of step into a starting role with little to almost no previous experience of him being a good college quarterback. So how are you feeling about this Texas team, and I guess specifically Archie Manning?
Well, Archie Manning, like you said, he has a very, very famous last name, right? And when you carry a last name like Manning, it goes without saying that there is an assumption that you are nothing short of exceptional as a quarterback. And we have to admit that the first time that we saw Arch Manning against Ohio State this year, he was everything but exceptional. Yes. And I would attribute some of that to him. Some of those plays and throws that he were doing were very rushed. A lot of them were back leg, off center throws. And I mean, if we're going to evaluate a generational quarterback, sometimes those are just unexcusable. And I will say that a lot of that also needs to be attributed to Ohio State's defense as well. They're the number one team in the nation for a reason, and their defense gave Arch Manning and all of Texas's offense nightmares. And that is a little bit of a culture shock, especially when you're opening up the season at the Shoe in Ohio State down in Columbus. I know that the pressure there is obviously insurmountable, but we expected him to at least look better than what he did. And he looked better against San Jose State. He looked better against UTEP, but these are teams that we are expecting Texas to steamroll. Yeah. So he needs to look better against teams like Sam Houston. He needs to look like that, I can put up 70 points on an offense if I want to, Arch Manning. We need to see that from him. And they have this Florida game, right? They have to go down to the Swamp.
That's a trap game right there.
Like hell it is. And I think, he's feeling really good right now. Sam Houston, we got the social media edits of him staring down defenders. He's feeling himself. He's feeling good. Okay, I want to see all of that energy down at the Swamp. And this is not a dig at Arch Manning. I want him to go down there and complete 70% of his passes and throw for 300 yards and 3 touchdowns and a rushing touchdown. I want him to go down to the Swamp and show us why he deserves all of the hype that we are giving him. And that's just, if he shows me that, I think they'll be fine for now, but then they have to go play Oklahoma at home in Texas, and Oklahoma's playing really, really good right now. But if I do remember correctly, I think that their starting quarterback is hurt right now. Yeah, I think that he just had surgery. And obviously, Oklahoma's top ranking is going to depend on how healthy they are at 100%. So let's just hypothetically say that they pull out this win in Florida and Mateer is not going to be the QB at Oklahoma. That might be the momentum that Texas needs to continuously prove that they deserve to be a top five team for the rest of the season. But what do you think about Texas and Arch and squad?
So my feelings about Archie and my feelings about Texas are vastly different. Um, I with Archie, I have only seen the flashes against very bad teams, which is hard for me personally to justify all the hype. Like, okay, I saw you play amazing at Sam Houston, San Jose State, and UTEP, but everything I saw from Ohio State made me question if you need to change your throwing form. Like, why are
I've
you
heard that a
throwing
lot.
and you're wincing? Why are you throwing with your body? Like, it just didn't seem to me like you're telling me you're a generational talent. Your whole family's played in the NFL. You've been basically from birth, you've had a football in your hand talking about how you're going to be this great generational quarterback and just not come to fruition in the sense of I like that hype if it's behind somebody that goes to a big school in high school and really makes a name for yourself. A great example, just kind of thrown out there, is Kyler. Kyler, high school, his win loss category almost doesn't make sense. He's like an actual video game. Goes to the biggest high schools in Texas, has won state championships, and you're like, okay, I see the flashes, I see how good you are. Archie went to like a 2A or a 3A school, which, okay, that's cool, but there's a big difference between 2 and 3A in football compared to 2 and 3A in, say, basketball, for instance. If you can play basketball, you can hoop. I don't care what school you go to. Football, it's not the same. We just see the difference between Sam Houston and Texas just on the caliber of players that they are putting on the field. So until Archie really plays a defense and shows me like one or two throws where I'm like, okay, that's an NFL level throw. Like that's what I was expecting you to do for the last 4 weeks. I don't really have much emotion towards Archie besides just the name of him being a Manny. When it comes to Texas, Texas is in the same spot that they've been, I feel like, for the last 3 or 4 years.
Yep.
Texas has like probably top 3 in recruiting classes every single year. They have athletes at every single position, but for whatever reason they really struggle on one, keeping their quarterback healthy, and well, that's really what they struggle with, having a healthy quarterback to be able to get their playmakers the ball. So Texas as a whole, I feel good about their team. I feel like they can definitely run this gauntlet. I feel like that's how good they are at every position outside of quarterback. I just need to see something from Archie before I am gonna hail where they're like, oh, he's the first overall pick. Like, well, not from how he's been playing this year. So
Yeah, and I will say that even when it comes to quarterback play as a whole, the offseason top five quarterback projection and what the actual top five quarterback projection is now after 3, 4 weeks of football is vastly different. You know,
yeah,
I mean, vastly different. We had Arch Manning as the Heisman candidate, right? The undisputed number one overall potential QB prospect over Kay Klubnik, over Garrett Nussmeier, over Lenora Sellers, over pretty much anybody you can think about when it comes to top quarterback play in the league. And now we're looking at Lenora Sellers, right? DJ Lagway doesn't look like what we thought that he was going to look. Mateer looks like a Heisman candidate, and I think that also attributes to what we're looking at as well. But I think we need to let Archie just lean into that pressure a little bit. I think he has a lot of weight on his shoulders, like we've said numerous times. And I think if he can lean into that pressure a little bit and pull off some of these upset wins, then it's going to help him settle in a little bit. But it's really up to him. There's at this point, no one can save him from himself but himself. And that's how I feel about it. But
kind of the good thing about their schedule too. Obviously, you had Ohio State as your first game. That's going to be tough, regardless of who you
right.
are. playing Ohio State as your first matchup. But then you essentially have 3 games to where win or lose at Ohio State, you say these next 3 games are really going to be us dialing in on what's working well, what we need to fix on our defense, on our offense. If it's specific play calls or dropbacks that Archie's just having problems with, like say throwing his shoulder or whatever the case may be, we need to tighten those up in these 3 games, because then we have Florida, Oklahoma, Kentucky, Vanderbilt, Georgia. Like, we're going to play good defenses who arguably are going to be on par with Ohio State. And if we play like we did in that game, we're not looking good going into the playoffs. So it's going to be interesting to see how they finish off. But number 8, and probably one of the more interesting just organizations on this list, because it seems like they kind of came out of nowhere. So go ahead and talk about Indiana, good old IU at number 8.
Oh yeah, IU. Hoosiers. Listen, I'm drinking the Hoosier Kool-Aid right now because based off of what we saw from them last season, they thought that last season was going to be a fluke, right? Yeah. IU was balling last year. And everyone said, oh, okay, every team has that one year where they're just amazing and then they come back down to earth. Well, ISU is undefeated right now. So,
I wish ISU was undefeated. We like that.
Well, no, it's funny because ISU lost to them and they didn't even score. So speaking of Indiana State, shout out to Sycamores. They definitely lost 73-0 to the team that we're talking about right now. But we can just go ahead and just move past that touchy part of the subject and talk about how great this IU team is. Listen, I did not think that they were going to be legit until I saw them beat the brakes off of Illinois like the way that they did. Because at the time, IU, I think, was 19 on the rankings, and Illinois was a top 10 team. They were number 9. And they made them look like a Division II football team. And it was bad. I mean, I thought I was going to get a competitive game at least, but this game was over with by halftime, the way I see it. And I mean, to put up 63 points against a top 10 team, I mean, come on now. And I mean, I get it, it's the Fighting Illini, but when you beat a top 10 team like that, you are reminding people that you are just as good as you were the year prior, if not better. And to be honest with you, I would definitely tread lightly if I was Oregon, because they have to see this IU team in a couple of days if we're going to, be frank. And I don't know, talk about a trap game, go to Oregon, who just had a really big win against Penn State. Wouldn't it be something if IU just brought them right back down to earth like they did Penn State? I think that would be way too poetic for college football to ignore. And I think that IU is a perfect team to do that.
Yeah, it's definitely something that's on the board. You've kind of seen IU has built this, it just seems like aura of just like smash mouth, like we know we're the underdog in every single game that we go to and we just genuinely don't care, that makes them so fun to not only watch but also to rank. Yes, they have like blowout wins across the board, but they're really not playing anybody. So once they play Oregon, I think the Michigan State game is going to be good. They're at Penn State, and then even I think at Purdue is going to be tough just because it's in-state rivalry. Mm-hmm. I think they have a couple more games on their roster or on their schedule that they can really solidify themselves and say, yes, we're undefeated, we're playing good, we're ready to go into the playoffs. Like, this is just what IU football is going forward. This is not a flash in the pan. This isn't just like a 2-season little stint. This isn't just because we got a new head coach. Like, our organization feels different now, and this Oregon game is really going to tell me a lot. Now, if they go into Oregon and they get absolutely routed, it might be a different conversation, but I don't see that happening this time around. So I'm really excited to see IU at Oregon. It's I think, going to be one of the best games that we have this season, actually. So,
without a doubt.
Let me look. And then next up, we got Penn State. Even though they just lost, how are you feeling about Penn State?
I'm actually really glad that Penn State is next on this list, because that is the game that I have circled on IU's football calendar. Yep. And I understand that, it's a ways away. It's, TBD currently on the schedule, but it's on the schedule. They have to go to Penn State and win at Penn State, and we know how that whiteout crowd is when it comes to a competitive Big Ten environment, and you're playing it, and you're playing IU, and yeah, I think that is the game that's going to show us exactly who these teams are made of, and that goes for both IU and Penn State. Because when you talk about Penn State, listen, they were ranked as high as 3 so far this season, and people were even upset and arguing and saying that they deserve to be the number 1 team opening up the season over Ohio State.
Yeah.
And a lot of Buckeye fans had a lot to say about that. You know, how are we the national champions, but you think that you are better than us? So a lot of people were silenced this past weekend when Penn State took that loss against Oregon. And to be completely honest, it's Drew Allar's fault. And I don't want to be the person here to completely bash him when it comes to performance in a tight game like that, right? I get that it's a tough environment, but you're at home, the crowd's behind you. I get that Oregon's a tough team. I get that they deserve the recognition and respect, but you're supposed to be this top 5 QB prospect. You were supposed to show us why you are that top 5 QB prospect. And I would say that he played a great game, but that interception at the end of the game was ugly. I mean, awful. And to throw that in overtime, knowing that all the marbles are on the table, I just don't. It's almost as if he didn't even take the time and the patience to go through his progressions. Like, he knew who he wanted to go to, regardless of what the defense was disguised as, if they had a stun or if they had a shell. It just, you cannot do that as a top QB prospect, especially a top QB prospect at a prominent Big Ten football organization like Penn State. And I think that Drew Aller is the motor that runs Penn State for the most part. I get that their offense is electric, but he is the motor, right? He was the motor last year. I know that they had Tyler Warren last year, but he was still getting Tyler Warren the ball. So, I think Penn State, they will have a very interesting schedule, because right now they took that tough loss against Oregon, so they can kind of regroup and go to UCLA, and then they're going to play Northwestern, and then they're going to go down to Iowa. All manageable in terms of competition, at least for a team of their caliber, right? Until they have to go to Ohio State. And as I just said, they were just saying that they deserve to be better than them before the season started. You think Ohio State has forgot about that? Absolutely not.
It's on the bulletin board.
I think Jeremiah Smith might go for 250 yards receiving that game.
That's gonna be ugly.
Yeah, I think that, and it's at Ohio State too, so they're gonna play upset. They're gonna play mean, and yeah, I think that game might be a blowout. Just might be a blowout. But how do you feel about Penn State, man? How do you feel about Drew Aller and squad?
So for a few of these schools, it's really based on their schedule. So, like Penn State, you really have, in my opinion, you have 3 games this year. You have Oregon, you have Ohio State, and Indiana. Every other game has to be a win. I don't even want to think about it. I don't want to say it's close. Like, we are really game planning for 3 legit teams on our schedule. Everything else should just be buttoned up and make sure we look good going into those big games. So if they drop to Ohio State or Indiana, the only thing on my mind is going to be, oh, Penn State's supposed to be this good. Like, yeah, but they don't beat anybody who's good. Like, look at their schedule. They've only beat teams who were unranked, and the teams who are ranked, they couldn't figure out how to get it done. So, and that's also how I felt about Penn State for the last 3 years. It's like they are always supposed to be so good, and how this is always supposed to be their year, and how Penn State organizationally and fan-wise are like, we're always overlooked because we're Penn State. It was like, well, no, you're probably overlooked because when we put you against teams who are top 10 caliber, you disappear. So they got 2 more games on their schedule, and these 2, Ohio State and Indiana, I think will really define how this season goes. If you play Ohio State super close, maybe it goes in overtime, even if you lose, that's still, in my opinion, a good game. Ohio State,
Agreed.
Arguably best team in NCAA. I would say they arguably have the best defense of any college team, and I'd say like by a large margin. So as long as you can make that team or make that game good, make it close, and then Indiana, you have to find a way to beat Indiana if you're Penn State. And if
You
you're
do.
saying, hey, well, we lost to Oregon and we lost to Ohio State, arguably top two teams in NCAA. Like, what exactly do you want from us? I'm like, okay, but outside of that, you have to win out the rest of your schedule. So we'll see if Penn State can kind of rally for the rest of their season, which I assume that they will. We'll just see if they can get up for those big games. So next up, we have kind of a team who is flying under the radar, I think, because they're also in Texas and kind of the Archie Manning noise is so loud, it's kind of drowning out some other Texas teams who are also very, very good. So next up at number 6, we have Texas A&M. How are you feeling about Texas A&M, my boy?
I really like Texas A&M. I really like their quarterback. I like their system. I like how explosive they are on offense. I think that Texas A&M is a team that they're going to try to outscore you first and then try to stop you second. I mean, the defense, they do have good performances, but when it comes to Texas A&M, when I think Texas A&M, I think offense. I mean, if we look at their games, their first three games, they scored 42, 44, and 41 respectively. I mean, and that is in rapid succession. That is week after week after week. That is production. That is productivity. That is a well-oiled machine. And even when you had to go down to Auburn and you were battle tested, you still won. You scored 16 points, but you held them to 10. So that showed me that, oh, okay, so now the defense is starting to catch up with how productive and how effective the offense is as well. So now I think that they're finding out the little kinks in the system, ironing them out, and I think that they have a chance to go undefeated if they can pull out that really, really tough trap game at LSU. I think that that's going to be a really good challenge for them. Like I said, Nussmeier and squad, we know what LSU is about, even though they just took that loss to Ole Miss. They're still a team to be reckoned with, especially in the SEC as well. And I think that game will definitely be must-see television, but that might be a game that we see Texas A&M kind of solidify their stance as a top 5 team in the nation. Because if you ask me, I do think that Texas A&M is a top 5 team in the nation, at least right now. They definitely have shown me that, and I would say that Texas A&M definitely made me a believer when they beat Notre Dame at home. And I know Notre Dame is supposed to be one of the golden childs of college football, but you beat them at home, and I get it. There was a missed field goal. Fine, whatever. Pout about it. I don't care. A win is a win. So I think Texas A&M definitely is a little bit underrated. I get it. They're number 6, but I think that they deserve a top 5 spot. I don't care if they're one spot off. I think that they've definitely proven that they are deserving of that. And I guess we really don't see any competition from them in terms of a team of their caliber until that LSU game, if you ask me. But what do you think about the Aggies, man?
It's going to be, so you saying their trap game is LSU. I would argue that their trap game is actually going to be South Carolina.
Yep.
And that's because I feel like once they get past Missouri, their next thought is going to be Texas. Like South Carolina, I don't think they're schedule wise, they're not gonna look good on paper, but once you actually get on the field, you're like, man, South Carolina is a legit SEC team. They do have some NFL players around the field. Like, they're fast, they hit. Like, they are a very competent, solid team. It's just their win-loss columns do not align with, I feel, the talent that they actually put on the field. So that's actually what I think is their trap game. I think there are a lot of the stories are going to come out. Oh, you have this Texas rivalry, Texas A&M, Texas, last game of the season. Archie Manning, is he going to finish out strong? And you're kind of going to overlook, this South Carolina team who's gritty, who wants to keep the game low scoring, defensive-minded game. So that's kind of my trap game for them. But until they kind of play a few more teams, I don't really know how to feel about them. Like, yeah, they beat Notre Dame, but I've always felt like Notre Dame shouldn't even be ranked. I feel like Notre Dame should just be a team by themselves that just goes to the playoffs every year because they manipulate their schedule better than any other team in college football, in my opinion.
They do.
So
They do.
It's gonna be a tough schedule going forward. I hope they don't get ahead of themselves and kind of look to that Texas game. But I really do like where they're positioned in terms of really trying to compete for a championship this year.
Yeah.
Next up, we have number 5 at Oklahoma. So still relatively close. It seems like we got 3 Texas schools. We have Oklahoma over here. But how you feeling about Oklahoma?
I think that the way I feel about Oklahoma needs to be broken up into two parts.
Okay.
And the reason I say that is Oklahoma, so far throughout the season, they've played nothing short of amazing. And that is both defense and offense, right? I think that they have a very productive and very potent offense when their quarterback, Mateer, plays. I think when Mateer plays, they are arguably a top five team in the nation. I mean, if you look at their wins, they beat Michigan at home, they beat Auburn, and I think that when it comes to how Oklahoma is structured as a team, when they are healthy, they are a force to be reckoned with, and they deserve to be circled on the calendar as a team you need to look out for not only now, for the rest of the season. But the second part, Mateer is injured. He has a hand injury, and according to reports, he's going to be out for at least a month. So that is potentially 4 games on their schedule that they have to play without their starting quarterback. And I just don't know if they're going to be able to sustain that gauntlet that they have to deal with while he's out. Because immediately after beating Auburn, they have Kent State. I would like to think that the backup quarterback can take care of Kent State. But you have Texas, you have South Carolina, you have Ole Miss, you have Tennessee, and you have Alabama. I think that he got hurt at possibly the absolute worst time in their schedule. And
Yeah, it's not right.
if he was happy, I think all of those games are a toss up, right? I say, hey, I would like to pick South Carolina, but Oklahoma looks good. I would like to say Ole Miss, but Oklahoma looks good. Their quarterback's not playing. So I don't know how good Oklahoma's going to look in these upcoming games. But I don't think that it's an ideal situation for the Sooners to be in. But what do you think about OU, man?
Yeah, I think OU's at a really bad spot right now. I think if everything was healthy for OU, it would be a very different conversation. Um, Specifically now with their quarterback hurt, I'm worried that they're going to try to end up rushing him back too early. And because of that, he's not going to be fully healthy. He's not going to play well. And when you're trying to rush your quarterback back to play top 10 caliber teams, that's not when I want you to rush back. I want you to rush back on this Kent State game. So, hey, can we get you out there, get you a few plays, whatever the case may be? Obviously, that's not going to happen at all, but that's where you want him to kind of take his breaks and say, hey, we're playing a team that we should beat just based on we are more talented than them. This is when I want you to get out there and make sure you feel good, all the reps are good, your injury's fine. I don't want you first game back, first time you've had contact is against an all-out blitz of Ole Miss. Like, that's just not where I want to see like a quarterback, not only for his health but for the team. And they're getting to the point where they're going to make me a believer or just not a believer at all in OU. Before they went to the SEC, kind of before they started talks about OU joining the SEC, the first thing that I thought about was there's no way OU deals with the physicality of the SEC. Like, they've always been a pass-happy team, and I just thought there would be no way, shape, and form they transition over to the SEC and they play the same caliber of football. Now, they've been playing really good, but they are just now getting into kind of the gauntlet, which is the SEC, which I have been excited for them to play to see, is OU really a contender when it comes to playing Texas, South Carolina, Ole Miss, Alabama? Like, now we can see really what Oklahoma's made of. However, without their quarterback, it doesn't give me a few view. So it very easily, they could lose these next couple of games just because he's hurt, and then he comes back and maybe they look really good. They could really be kind of a sleeper team to get into the playoffs because they might have a few losses, but they lost because they didn't have their quarterback, not that they were necessarily the worst team. So I feel like they're at a very weird situation. But how do you feel like losses might affect Oklahoma, I guess?
Well, I think that like I said, I think that the injury to their quarterback is definitely ill-timed because of who they play upcoming in the season. I mean, and they end their season with mostly all SEC matchups, and they're all ranked matchups on top of that. So this is the worst possible situation for Oklahoma to go through as a football team. And I mean, when we think about Oklahoma in the past, we have to think about they have always run off of how productive and how effective their quarterbacks are going to be. I mean, Jalen Hurts, Baker Mayfield, Caleb Williams, Spencer Rattler. I think that we already understand, based off of that NFL talent alone that has been represented by this university at some point in time, that they operate as a quarterback friendly team, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
And
100%.
if they have that generational quarterback prospect that is NFL pro ready, then they excel. Look at what Jalen Hurts did at Oklahoma. Baker Mayfield.
Yeah,
We know how big Baker Mayfield was when he was out in Oklahoma. You know, it's just one of those. They operate at however strong their quarterback is. And without the quarterback, I just can't give a definitive answer on how Oklahoma and their ranking is going to shake out over the next month. And that's not a knock to them. It's just an unfortunate situation. Also, definitely hoping for a speedy recovery to Mr. Mateer. I definitely hope he comes back sooner rather than later. Not too soon. I hope that hand is healthy so we can hopefully salvage whatever may or may not be left of the Sooner season.
yeah. Now, next up we have number 4, Ole Miss, who freaking Ole Miss, man, has absolutely I shut up haters when it came to this LSU game. Coming out on top, beating them 24-13. Ole Miss has always been to me, a storyline team where they've always had something at the end of the season kind of go wrong. Their receivers get hurt. Their defensive linemen are suspended a game or something. This might be the season where if everybody can stay healthy and everything can stay in line, this might be a really good shot at Ole Miss kind of taking the next steps at an SEC championship. But how are you feeling about Ole Miss?
I think Ole Miss is that SEC team that, they have a very good fan base. Everybody that rocks with Ole Miss, they're going to tell you that Ole Miss is going to beat anybody and everybody that comes down there, right? Yeah. But when we look at them in terms of how effective they are as a team this year, I do have to tip my hat off to Lane Kifflin and team. They do definitely have a very great squad. That quality win against LSU definitely raised some eyebrows because I will say, if I'm going to go that far, they were favorited going into that LSU game, right? And how you get favorited over a top 4 team, I don't understand. But hey, they clearly knew something that we didn't, right? And they ended up winning the game, which also just further solidifies what they knew going into the game already, right? And Austin Simmons is a very good, very young, very raw, but very productive quarterback for that system. He's only 19, but he's a very smart, intellectual individual, especially on the football field. And I think that as long as he can continue to grow in that offense and that complexity of that playbook kind of develops a little bit and allow him to do a little bit more and excel, I think that Ole Miss can definitely become a force to be reckoned with when it comes to CFP playoff time. I think that the fact that he is 19 will be a little bit of a challenge when it comes to the intensity of college football playoff football, but at least for the rest of the season, I like Ole Miss's chances. I like their schedule. I think that, they do play Georgia, right? That's going to be an interesting game because it's at Georgia. They play Oklahoma, but as we said, we don't know what they're going to look like with their quarterback. So outside of Georgia and the South Carolina game, I don't really see a credible threat for Ole Miss to really, deal with. I would say that they're not even necessarily trap games. It's just games that they need to ensure that they win, right? And I mean, do you have a hot take about Ole Miss, or am I just going completely off the rails here and thinking that they actually may be legit this year?
To be honest, not really. I'm gonna need them. Because outside of, this LSU game, I mean, we have nothing else to base them off of. So let me see what they look like against Georgia. Let me see what they look like against Oklahoma. And it's probably the game I'm actually going to watch the most is going to be South Carolina. I don't care who plays South Carolina. I know South Carolina is a solid team. If you can put up points on them, I'm going to be like, you know what? You have some options. But I don't have any hot takes about Ole Miss. They're kind of just same old, same old. We're great. We have a lot of bias in terms of our fans just think we're amazing. As soon as we got an offensive-minded head coach, we thought we were going to win every year, and I don't see any SEC championships, let alone national championships. So unless I can really just see some standout performances against Georgia and then maybe Oklahoma if their quarterback is healthy, then that'll tell me something. But otherwise, it's just kind of standard Ole Miss. Like, let's just see what they do for the rest of the season.
Yeah, I like that take. I agree with that. I think as far as college teams go right now, I think that the rest of the teams on the list definitely are a notch above what we have
Yeah.
discussed from everybody else on the list. And we can go ahead and just get into that right now. Number three, you got the Hurricanes, the U, Carson Beck looks really good so far. I think that move from Georgia to Miami did wonders for him. I was a little worried in the offseason when I heard about the off field stuff, right? But I mean, this is gonna sound crazy. Miami kind of likes that, to a certain extent, right? Like they like the not the controversy, but they like that flavor, that swag that they can carry with their team. Like we know about Miami's defenses. We don't even have to go down the list of the long-standing Miami alumni that they have come to love and adore because of how they played the game of football down there in that school, right? And outside of Notre Dame, who scored 24 points on them, nobody else has scored more than 12 points on them. So, do they have the best defense in college football? I would like to say so. I think that when you put a very experienced, very talented, very patient quarterback in Carson Beck in a system to succeed, it works. And the fact that their defense is the best defense in college football through week 4. I think it goes without saying. If Notre Dame only put up 24 points on you and they're putting up 55 points on everybody else, okay, I get that. If they put up 40 points against Texas A&M, but they can only put up 24 points against you, okay, you definitely have a case for the strongest defense in the league. And Miami, outside of this Florida State game, which I think is the game of the year for them, if they can somehow beat Florida State, I don't see Miami losing a game.
No.
Yeah.
No, they definitely should not lose unless like a miracle happens and it's just an amazing upset or an injury. I don't see how they lose any games.
Yeah.
Like even the Florida State one after Florida State kind of got exposed the way they did the last game. I feel like Miami should run the table. Beck is legitimately looking like a Heisman caliber type of player, and that's really what I guess surprised me the most when he went over to Miami. I thought Miami was going to be like a fringe 15, top 10 team would have been like, we had a really good year. I didn't think Beck was going to come in and basically take the reins and say, hey, I've played in big games, put everything on me. I'm going to make sure everything's running collectively. And this also, I know we kind of touched on it a little earlier. I think this NIL money system that they have now really makes college football more interesting because we now have players staying longer in college, which is bringing the level of play up. So you might be playing legitimately against a 6-year quarterback of Utah who has started all 6 years, has seen enormous defenses, play callers, atmospheres. Like he's trial and tested, might not have a cannon for an arm, might not be the best when it comes athletically gifted, but he's seen enough and he's been through enough to make basically any team that they are on competitive. So I think this NIL stuff and the transfer portal and being able to move to a team just because you're like, oh, they might have some better wide receivers than we do. I think it really just opens up the landscape to where these rankings used to be the same 5 teams every single year, where now we're getting to the point where you're like, hey, who's going to be the new team to break into the top 25? Who's going to be the transfer that's going to go to Wisconsin next year that's going to make them a top 5 team or top 10 team? So I think all that stuff really kind of boils into the narrative that is college football. And one of the reasons why I think for most people, Saturdays are almost more enjoyable than Sundays just because of all the different matchups, the different storylines, and just everything that kind of goes into college football. So next up at number 2, we have Oregon, who has... Look, they look dynamic on offense. People are calling for my boy to go ahead and just give him the Heisman now. But I think they got 1 or 2 more games on their schedule that are going to be interesting, specifically Indiana and USC. Other than that, Oregon's going to have, I think, a relatively an easy schedule outside of those games where they can really just make sure that everything leading up into the playoffs, into their conference championship games are just buttoned up, and Oregon needs to make sure they're healthy and ready to go, because outside of really like those two games, I don't feel like they should be tested much for the remaining schedule. How are you feeling about them?
I think as a whole, Oregon is definitely it's they're a great team. I can't take anything away from Oregon in terms of how well they have played so far throughout this year, and how well they are as confident as I feel will continue to play throughout the course of this season. I mean, and I say that because if we look at their schedule is very generous. If you look at it from a Big Ten perspective, I think that their biggest games this year are Indiana, Penn State, USC, and maybe Washington if Washington continues to grow like I think that they will. But I think, in my opinion, Oregon is going to run the table on every team they play this year except for Indiana. I think that they're going to finish the season with that one loss on their record, and that's going to play a role into where they fall on the CFP playoff standings. But as far as a team, continuity from top to bottom, they're a well-oiled machine. I think that they're very productive. I think that they have the receivers and the quarterback to system to be as effective as they can be in order to win the games that they need to, if that makes sense. I mean, they did pull out a win in Penn State, and that is probably their statement win of the season so far. I mean, I think people really need to understand how tough of an environment Penn State actually is to play in. And the fact that you went in there and won a game, and not in regulation, but overtime as well. So, I mean, hey, that is your statement win. You are deserving of the number 2 spot, because the team that you beat was number 3 at the time, if I'm not mistaken, before the new rankings had come out. And now you're kind of showing, okay, well, we beat a top 3 team. So now the target is on our backs. And I think no team is going to give them any issue other than Indiana. I think that Indiana game is going to give them headaches for some reason, even if it's at home. I think that is their game. If they can get past Indiana, they will go undefeated. And
yeah, I 1,000% agree. Yeah.
And as long as they can take care of business and Kirk Cinetti down, and when the Hoosiers come into town, I think that Oregon might be that undefeated Big Ten team outside of Ohio State that could be in the CFP playoff that gets that first round bye. So, I think Oregon, we know what Oregon is. We know what they're capable of. They just need to handle business, and they will be fine, right? But if they sleep on Indiana, then I don't know what's going to happen to them, right? And
then, yeah, number 1, kind of finishing out the list, Ohio State, who has unanimously voted number 1, and they also said that unanimously voted the best defense in college football, which I thought was pretty interesting. But how are you feeling about Ohio State?
I think that Ohio State is everything that we expected them to be, right? They're strong, they're dominant. Julian Sand has definitely impressed a lot as the quarterback for that system. I know that there were some questions about him coming into the season on how he was going to be able to produce that high-powered offense that it has some players go on to the league, like Ibuka and Team and Marvin Harrison as a couple of years past. But I know that, at least so far, him and Jeremiah Smith seem to have no issues for the most part. I've seen a couple of bombs. I think that all is well down in Columbus in terms of an offensive standpoint. And I know I said Miami's defense is number 1, and I still, unpopular opinion, do think that their defense is number 1, but Ohio State is 1A. I wouldn't say that Ohio State is number 2, but they're definitely 1A. I have Miami number 1 and Ohio State 1A. And the only reason that I have Ohio State as 1A is I'm just looking at the level of the competition that they have played compared to Miami. And with the outside of Texas, I don't think that Ohio State has had the level of competition that Miami has had to contain at the rate that they've had to contain week in and week out when it comes to their strength of schedule, which could be their fault, could not be their fault, but that's up to whoever, plans that prior to the season. But we're going to see what they're made of when they have to go down to Illinois, when they have to play Penn State, and of course, the last game of the season when they played Michigan, because I don't think that they've beat Michigan in the past 4 years. I don't care.
Yeah, it's a much different Michigan team, though. So
exactly,
it's a little different.
It is. But hey, if Michigan has beat you 4 years in a row, I know that there are OSU players in the league that have not beat Michigan, and and it still bothers them. I'm not going to name names,
Yeah.
but if you look up some of the interviews on some of these players and you talk about that OSU and Michigan rivalry and they don't have a win on that belt, they feel some type of way. So, yeah, I think that Ohio State is definitely the team to beat this year. We haven't really seen them be tested this year outside of Texas, but that was week one. If we're going to really see when their real test is, I think that their real test is going to be against Penn State, and that's going to definitely determine on how far Ohio State goes in the college football playoff. But I have them in my top three for the rest of the year. I don't think that Ohio State really has anything pressing to worry about. But what do you feel about the Buckeyes?
I would say outside of just like a major meltdown, I think it'd be really hard to keep them out of the top three. And this is also one of the more interesting just teams to look at over the past few years, because Ohio State, we can argue, puts out wide receiver U. They put out some amazing receivers, defensive ends. They put out NFL like talent every single year, and not just one player. They put out multiple NFL talents every single year when it comes to the draft. And seeing how good their depth is, at any point in time, they have another 4 or 5-star recruit that's ready to come in and make a name for himself, regardless if it's the beginning of the season, if it's the middle of the season because of an injury. They just have so much depth, and they're just so good at every single position. It makes it really hard for me to write them off, especially because of what their schedule looks like. I mean, I feel like they really got blessed when it came to their schedule. Sure, you had Texas the first week, which that was going to be a hard game anyway. I think we might have overestimated how good Texas was just because of Archie Manning coming and being their starting quarterback. But regardless, Texas was still a very good team. I mean, after that, you could argue Illinois, but we just saw Illinois got absolutely routed. So, okay, Penn State, well, they also just lost. And then, well, you got Michigan, but this is not a national championship contender, Michigan. This is just the standard rivalry game. Make sure you don't keep it close because anything can happen in these type of games. So I think Ohio State is in a very good situation to run it back and raise up the national championship this year. Their schedule is, in my opinion, very manageable. They do get tested here and there, but it's not like they're getting tested week in and week out. They're not dealing with injuries. They obviously have a championship caliber coach. They have talent everywhere. It's just really hard for me to look at another team after what kind of Ohio State has done so far this season and say, yeah, like they're definitively better than Ohio State. I think you have some arguments across the board. Oregon is super interesting just because of like the play style they have in their quarterback. Miami's interesting because of Beck just having so much knowledge about not only the team that he's playing, but just so much experience back there. So Ohio State right now, I think they are easy pick to put number one. I think there's going to be a lot of money that's bet on them to win another championship. So it's going to be interesting. Now, out of these top 25 teams, do you feel like any of these teams are frauds by chance?
I mean, the top 25 always has a couple of frauds in the list, don't they?
True.
I don't want to be biased and say BYU is one of my frauds. I just think that based on what we've seen from BYU in the past, that 4-0 start, I think that it's not going to be sustainable. And I mean that with the utmost respect. I think that BYU is definitely one of my sleeper teams that I won't say that they're frauds. I would just say that in terms of strength of opponents compared to them, they fall on the lower side. And that's just not a notch on their belt. It's just better football programs out there that I think that they wouldn't be able to beat in the college football playoff. But that's humble opinion. I know that this is football, things happen, and that would be one of the upsets that I would not see coming. I would not put that past them either if they were to make it to the college football playoff. But BYU would probably be my team. As far as any other teams that are frauds, really? I think, it's a tough. BYU is probably the one that sticks out the most to me. I would say Notre Dame, and the only reason I say Notre Dame as well is because it really upset me when I saw that they were the only 0-2 team that was still in the top 25.
Oh,
I think
thank God.
I'm like, how do you? I don't understand how you are the only team in the top 25 that doesn't have a win, but you're still a top 25 team. And I understand the argument that there is not a team that is better than Notre Dame, even though that they are 0-2. I would say that that's arguable. I would say that that's arguable because, yes, I understand that talent of a roster plays a role. Jeremiah Love is a monster. He's going to be great when he goes into the league. I understand that Notre Dame will always be laced from top to bottom in terms of talent on a roster. Nobody's taking away their talent, but it's what you do with that talent that shows how deserving you are of a top 25 spot. You can put a whole bunch of talented people on a roster and they won't be able to produce anything. That is a possibility of happening. South Carolina is a perfect example, right? Florida, perfect example,
I agree.
right? Teams that, you expect more from based on just the names on the paper, for lack of a better term. But Notre Dame, I think that they're probably going to run the table just on how weak their schedule is for the rest of the year. These 2 losses that they have on their schedule are going to be the only 2 losses that they're going to have on the season. Everybody's going to forget that the first 2 losses that they had were their first 2 losses to start the season, and then they're going to win every game, and then they're going to say, oh, well, we deserve a very high college football playoff spot because we ran the table for the end of the season.
Yep.
And as long as they get a sustainable spot in a college football playoff, Notre Dame can beat anybody. I think we figured that out last year, right? So I think that their angle now is just to get into the playoffs. Yeah. Once they get there, they like their chances.
Yeah, they have a very clear path, which is, hey, win out, you'll most likely go to the playoffs, especially if you assume Miami and Texas A&M are both going to be good. They're going to be highly ranked at the end of the year. So if you're saying, hey, 2 losses to 2 great teams, you kind of have to let us in. I'm actually going to call them as my fraud, though, as this is just kind of standard Notre Dame. We have what people could argue a very soft schedule outside of 1, maybe 2 games that allows us to run into the playoffs on a great winning streak. So what are they probably going to win? 1, 2, 3, 4. I mean, they're going to be on an 8-game winning streak, at least going into the playoffs. They're going to say, oh, everything's flowing. Look how great this offense is. They're putting up numbers everywhere. They're stopping teams. They're holding teams to under 10 a game. And you're like, okay, well, who are you playing? Oh, you're playing Navy, Pittsburgh, and Boston College? Like that's what we're talking about, Notre Dame. And I get that every year from Notre Dame. I understand that there's talent everywhere, but the only times that I get to normally see the talent from Notre Dame go up against another team that I would consider to be on par, they lose during the regular season, Miami, Texas A&M, or they go to the playoffs and they get blasted. Last year was a little bit different, but we will see if that trend continues because all I have of Notre Dame is them being overrated and overhyped, and then they actually play a team with some legit coaching, legit players, and they're like, Notre Dame just moves a little bit slower. Like they weren't able to get the corner against this SEC team than they were against Pittsburgh. And it's like, well, yeah, because they was playing Pittsburgh. So I'm gonna call them as my fraud, just because I've seen this story too many times for Notre Dame. But we'll see how they kind of finish up the season. Now, do you have any hot takes?
I do like Marcus Freeman as a coach, though.
Oh, do I?
I do like Marcus Freeman as a coach, though.
I do.
Even though we said all this about Notre Dame, I do like Marcus Freeman as a coach, and I will tip my hat to Marcus Freeman. I know that a lot of this is not his fault. No. I get that, but he's trying to figure it out. But what were you saying, big dog? Go ahead, my boy. I didn't mean to cut you.
So you got any hot takes for us?
See, I feel like my hot takes are like kind of dispersed right now. I think I'm gonna spare the people out there a little bit. I know I've had a couple of controversial takes, at least in terms of rankings wise right now. But my hot take is that I think that Indiana's gonna beat Oregon when that game comes up. But
okay.
I know I've said that a couple of times on this podcast. I just think that the way that Indiana's playing right now, I think that Indiana and that Oregon game is just going to be the perfect storm for both teams, right? And it's going to be a matter of who blinks first, who's going to make the first mistake, who's going to throw the most picks, who's going to get the most passing yards, who's going to be able to stop the run, who's going to be able to limit the explosive offenses of both teams, who's going to be able to contain those offenses is going to win that game. And I think that while Oregon may be better equipped to do that, I think that Indiana is going to be – I think that they're going to be coached better to win that game. Yeah. And that's no disrespect to Dan Lanning. I just think that the way that IU is operating right now, that will be their testament game of the season so far for sure.
Yeah, I like that a lot, and I also agree. I don't have IU going in there winning. I do feel like this is going to be a different type of test than that Penn State game was. I feel like it's going to be a much different game and its totality. So it's going to be very interesting to watch. So my hot take actually is going to be the landscape of college is changing, and we've started seeing it with the transfer portal. We started seeing it with NIL, but I think we are gearing up to see a much average aged player to be a lot older in college football because now they're increasing how many years of eligibility you have, they're increasing how many times you can transfer and all that type of stuff. So I think seeing fourth year, fifth year, 6 year players in college who are playing well, who are more or less dominating their level of competition just because they're bigger, stronger, faster, older, I think is something that the NCAA might want to get ahead on. Having people, I don't know if you've seen it. I'll try to put up a thing with the actual article. You see the 43-year-old retired Major League Baseball player went and he's playing tight end for some SEC school now.
I think I heard about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know what the hell is
Yeah.
going on with that. I don't know how that's legal. And to be honest, I remember when there was a lot of situations where injured players could continuously reclassify. And I'm like, okay, I get it. That's fine. If your body's failing you, then you definitely deserve the opportunity to have the year that you need if you're healthy. I get that. Sometimes they stretch that a little too far. You know, like, I mean, all right, bro, you're 29, okay?
Hey, just for the love of the game, for the love of the game.
Right. And I mean, I get it that there's even players like I will say, well, I had an issue with it a little bit with Bo Nix as a quarterback, because I mean, Bo Nix and Justin Herbert, I believe they're the same age, and they were drafted what 2 years apart, 3 years apart, and I just look at that like Bo Nix was the quarterback of Oregon, he was the quarterback of Auburn. Yeah, right. And I remember vividly both eras of those teams when Bo Nix was the quarterback. So I just think like, okay, like at a certain point, we have to limit how much we allow these players to continuously play at the collegiate level.
Right.
And I understand that reps are everything. As we looked at with Anthony Richardson as a quarterback in the NFL, reps are definitely a necessity when it comes to evaluating quarterbacks. But when you flip the coin and you look at Bo Nix, I want to say he played 5 seasons of college football.
Yeah.
And 5 high-level seasons of college football. So he was NFL ready
day one,
2 years before he was even drafted.
Yep.
Right?
Because that's when he should have gotten drafted. Yeah.
That's how I feel. It's just like, all right, you know, you can redshirt your first year, and that means you technically have 4 years of football.
Oh, then you had COVID. Oh, then you transferred. Oh, then you came back because you got a master's in communications. Like, yeah, oh, okay, all right.
Right. Like, okay, after your 4 years, you got to go. Like, I will accept a redshirt year. After that redshirt year, I get sophomore, junior, senior, super senior, get out. Like, that's how I feel. That's how I feel. You know?
I feel like it's making, like I said, college football a lot more competitive. It's raising the play of everybody in college. And I think it's also making the NFL more competitive. Because now, obviously, you're still going to get guys that come out who are younger. If you just see the talent, you're not going to tell somebody to wait 4 years to come out of college or something like that. Like, if you see the talent, like I think Williams is a great example, wide receiver from Alabama. He reclassified up, so he was there when he was 17. I think he played when he was 18, but he was the youngest, player on our team. You're like, oh, I see the talent. Like, yes, he's young, but that's a NFL wide receiver. He just needs to grow into his body and get some reps in. But now, when you can, like, if you're the Chiefs and you can draft somebody who's been in college for 4 years and will immediately come on your team and make an impact, like, will he be a Pro Bowl level receiver? Probably not. But has he been a guy that's, played football for 4 years at a legit level, who knows concepts, who knows schemes, who knows how to fit in and knows exactly his role on a winning caliber team. I think it's going to be really interesting not only to see the transition, to see teams take rookies not because of their upside, but because of how they impact the game from day one. I feel like we also see that in basketball, for instance. When you watch the Nuggets draft, the Nuggets are not drafting, freshmen who have the ceiling of going to be an all-star. They want the third-year captain for North Carolina who's going to be a 3-and-D guy who knows exactly what his role is and how he's going to fit in. And we're going to see that more in the NFL. And I think it's going to be really cool to watch. And I think there's going to be a lot more of household names in college football because they are staying longer. I think for some of these kids, it makes it really hard to say, man, I'm getting $3 million a year. They have me drafted as a second, third round guy. Why not come back for another year? Let me get a couple more mil. Maybe we can win a national championship, increase my rank.
Jeremiah Smith.
Yeah, like it's not just how quickly can I get out of here and go to the pros. Like I'm making money. Let me stay. Let me get my education. I feel like NIL was a great thing, not only for college football, but also for the NFL. And we're kind of seeing that across the landscape with so many more teams in the top 25 that, for lack of better words, we never thought would be here. Like Georgia Tech, 17? I mean, it is early, but like, did they become a powerhouse all of a sudden? Well, no, they had a couple transfers. They've been playing good. It's like, okay, it doesn't take 4 or 5 years to rebuild an organization anymore. Because of the transfer portal, year one, you get in there, you get your people in. Year two, you get some recruits, you get some transfers. Year three, you're like, okay, can we compete? The leash for new coaches in college, specifically at dominant programs, I feel like is a lot shorter than when it used to be. And that's why you feel we talk about first game of the year you lost. You're like, all right, we need to get him up out of here. Like, hold on, it's our first game. Now we're a top 10 ranked team. Like, no, but the standard's different here. We don't like losing at all. So just something to think about. But we really appreciate you stopping by on this episode of the podcast. Like I said, my name's Trey. This is Ramsey.
Absolutely.
Better Day Sports. If you are new to the channel, make sure you hit the subscribe button and notification bell to be notified every time I post a video. And leave a comment in the comment section down below how you feel about ESPN's top 25 college football rankings. Anybody you feel should be higher, anybody you feel should be lower, anybody you feel is an absolute fraud, like Notre Dame, or like Miami, who you feel as just back out here trying to win a Heisman. So, love to see your comments in the comment section down below, and we will see you in the next one. Peace.
Peace.